so much has changed underground in the Nullcorp facility since you last saw me. We finished the last video with a core mechanic of a game about breaking a cube, which is, well, mechanic of breaking a cube. We can hide precious ores inside the cube and break it with a variety of different tools to extract them. But all this action was taking place in a boring testing area, so first I wanted to create a proper level design for the prototype. I was considering many different approaches, one of which is a cabin factory style. That means a clean, corporate look. However, in my sketches I was leaning more into the direction of something grimy, maybe an underground cave or something similar. Clean office spaces you may see in Severance didn't play well with the idea of mashing cubes into pieces, definitely producing a lot of dirt in the process. So I decided on the cave approach instead. I started to block out the playing area by creating a grey box, which is basically a 3D sketch of the space. It gives all the gameplay flow information while not taking that much time to build. Nothing from that grey box actually stayed in the game, however building it gave me a way to brainstorm with myself what I wanted to achieve. At this point I realized I actually do not know that much about good level design, so I watched every talk on that topic I found on YouTube. A breakthrough for me was this walkthrough of an example level made by Peter Field.
What the space would feel like if it presented too much information to the player right off the bat. We can remove the geometry, and you can see that entering a space like this is just not engaging in the slightest because it gives the player all of the information right off the bat. You can see the exit, you can see all of its secrets, it's not hiding anything, there's no reason to move around and explore.
I understood I have a long way to go to match this legend's grey boxing, and despite really trying to make as compelling of a level design as I could, I failed miserably. I am an artist first and foremost, and I just couldn't imagine what look I was going for exactly. So I came back to the drawing board, and instead of making a sprawling level design, I thought it would be simpler for my artsy brain to start from mood and vibes. There was supposed to be this big pit in the middle in which you broke the cubes, and then when you extracted everything they were supposed to fall down to lava or some incineration system. So I started from that. I created a pit in Blender and also a grate which was supposed to move away to allow the cube to fall. This was actually my first ever 3D model I've done. Not the prettiest I've seen, but will have to do. After grabbing some pipes, lamps and the button from Sketchfab, I almost had my pit ready. I added lights, volumetric fog, particles and made lava material. That's the footage I recorded for the teaser of the last video.
Welcome to Extraction Nullcorp domain.
However, in engine it looked more like that, because there were no sounds yet. There is a saying in game dev industry that sound is 70% of the feedback players get in game, and that for horror it may be 80 or even 90%. My good friend from Bloober Team, a firm that made Layers of Fear, The Medium and Silent Hill Remaster, told me not to judge my game at all before I added sounds to it, because they are so important. So I thought it was time to do it. It was time to add sounds. When I was working in Unity, I had to write my own sound manager and master sounds a lot. And I expected a similar workload waiting for me in Unreal. If I want my sound to be heard from a specific direction, for example, I can just create attenuation settings with a few clicks. I can create complex sounds by overlaying different files over each other without the use of third-party software. You may say that it's not so big of a deal because you may do it in FL Studio or wherever and just export ready-to-go complex sounds. But being able to do that in Engine, I am able to work and test faster. And most importantly, randomize sounds more easily. For example, footsteps. I am checking what surface the character is walking on, and based on that, taking one of the random step sounds from that group. I do the same for hits, but here I overlay multiple different sounds. It's super easy to create complex yet randomized sounds that way in Unreal with an ability to quickly change them or swap parts of them. With sounds in the game, just walking around the block and smashing stuff suddenly felt really good. I also swapped my hammer-based visual effect to a more robust, material-based visual effect. Now I can just assign different physics materials to any surface, and walking on it or hitting it results in a different visual and sound effects. There was a lot of audio-visual updates, but not much happened on the gameplay side, so I had to improve that aspect as well. The main loop of the game was supposed to consist of distinguishing between regular and contaminated nodes. The player was supposed to put the ore to either collector or incinerator. So I created them. I decided on making bunker-like armored rooms with heavy metal doors so that the player may store multiple ores inside before triggering the incinerating sequence.
A part of your payment was added to your account.
If he chose correctly, he would get money based on the value of the ore. If the player made a mistake and put contaminated ore to the collector, this would happen.
Breach of the continuum imminent. Collector's shielding panels at 47%. Refrain from putting further contaminated ores inside of it.
I think this explosion still needs some love, but it was good enough for the prototype. It gives the player visual feedback and sets in place all of the systems I will need in the future. I decided to give the player 2 chances every day. So every day, the player would come down fully healed, with resilience to live enough through one mistake. The other one would kill him and result in restarting the day. If enough money is gathered through collecting ores, the player can now unlock new weapons, visible under those glass domes. I wanted to tease the player with new available weapons, but keeping them out of reach. I also updated the font of the game, and now, with the sound design, even buying or not being able to buy weapons feels good. At this point, the worst feeling part was breaking the cube, and this is the most important part of the game. I knew I had to act. I remade all the impacts and added force to them, which now scatters the pieces around the cube. Just compare this breaking with that. I also created a few different cubes. A dirt one, a contaminated one I used for teaching the player about contaminated nodes, and one made of meat. This is the cube I teased previously, but now fully realized. Just take a listen. I think it also greatly visualizes the idea of uncertainty I want to induce in the player. What am I doing here, breaking the cube made of meat? How and why was it created? And most importantly, is that tooth contaminated or not? Of course, I won't give you answers to those questions. If you want to know them, you will have to play the game when it releases. But at this point, I was really starting to outline the story and the decisions that will wait for the player along the way. One last thing I needed was a system for spawning new cubes. To get rid of them, I would just open the grate and drop the cube into lava, but I wasn't sure what to do for spawning them. I had an idea of a big crane just dropping the cube from above, but that seemed not story-driven enough. So then I thought about materializing the cube in some way, to show the amazing technology which goes into assembling reality into those unholy blocks. But this was not mechanical enough for my taste. So in the end I created this monstrosity. It's both huge, mechanical, and spiritual in a way. This was probably the first time I really made use of that audio system in Unreal I told you about. The sound made by the Scooper is built in this graph, and uses steam sounds, metallic sounds, and even the scream at the end. I can tell you it's not here by accident.
New cube has been provided.
The machine really worked for me because it exemplified what I wanted to do with the game. There isn't that much happening, but what is happening isn't there by accident and has meaning. And in terms of meaning, it was time to finally outline at least some aspects of the corporation. I knew I wanted to use a lot of decals printed everywhere across the workspace. They worked really well inside the incinerator and collector, and I wanted to use things like that to make the playing area more believable, like it's a part of a real factory. First step to do that was to create a Nullcorp logo. I am really proud of this design, using only a single color, just as you do with modern logos. And most importantly, the negative space, which I think speaks volumes in the empty null part of the word. Also created a small image of the hand disassembling the earth into cubes, which might as well be read by the public in the opposite way. Nullcorp building the world block by block, but the truth is, of course, different. When that was done, I made a few more models to create a console the player operates with small cubes. It's a nice concrete design. A place for the logos, some decals of damage and control panel player can use to operate the facility. I even added a stress relief cactus. One final step was to add an announcer. I love the voices of evil corporations. One of such examples is the voice of Fazbear in Pizzeria Simulator.
Great. Now it's time to put all your eggs into one basket and take a huge gamble on your future. A gamble that comes with a 100% chance of success in some cases. What are we talking about? We're talking about becoming a Fazbear Entertainment franchisee.
For my voice though, I wanted to do something more soothing. A female voice which would contrast with the grim, dark space around. So I added the voice line system, which would make sure voice lines aren't playing over each other, and introduced the voice of Nullcorp.
Welcome. We congratulate you on passing the recruitation process and starting your work as an extraction and resource allocation specialist for environmental reclamation, the Eraser. Your job is to disassemble cubes provided by the corporation.
There was still a lot I wanted to do. I wanted to add more story beats to make the playing area bigger than just a single room, make more cubes and tools and much more. But I knew there was a smarter move, just inside my reach, to create a main menu instead, and make a build of the game to show to the others. With that, I can test. Make sure that the game is fun to play and gather ideas about potential directions for future development. And that was it. After around a month of developing a game about breaking a cube, I was doing my first playtest. An impressive feat, if you ask me, especially given that first playtest of Primal Fray, my previous game, was done over a half a year after the start of development. Now the real question was whether my players would like it or hate it. If you want to know, subscribe to the channel and I'll see you next time.